Alright, my little math friends, here we are moving further into Chapter 9. Now we're on 9.3a, and what we're going to be doing is calculating the area of composite shapes, okay? Composite shapes, composite means many, alright? And let's take a look at what a composite shape is. A composite shape is two or more shapes that are connected together, okay? And you guys have already calculated the area of shapes by themselves, such as triangles, rectangles, circles, things like that. Now we're just going to be putting those shapes all together to kind of make one big shape. Okay, something really important on the rest of this chapter with Chapter 9. It's important to stay organized. Okay, and I'm going to give you some tips for that because if you're like me, sometimes we are not the most organized people and we need some help to stay organized, whereas there are other people who are super organized and have their life together. Alright, so if you're one of those that kind of needs some tips, I will help you out with that so that we can stay organized because it's going to make our life easier on these problems. Okay, so let's take a look at what we have going on and let's calculate some area of these composite shapes. Here is our first example. Okay, we have this composite shape here, and as you're looking at this thing, you're probably already looking at that there's a triangle there, there's a couple rectangles. You can see the individual shapes that make up this shape together. Okay, here are the formulas we are going to be working with for 9.3a. We're going to be looking at the formula for the area of a triangle, which is the base times the height divided by 2, and then the area of a square or rectangle, which is just the length times the width. Okay, those are the two things we are going to be working on. Alright, so the first thing we want to do is right down here, step number 1, we want to break the shape into individual shapes. Alright, we want to take this shape here and we just want to break it into individual shapes. Okay, so I'm going to start doing that. You've probably spotted this triangle up here. Okay, so I'm going to separate that triangle out. You can just use some dotted lines there. Okay, we're just going to break it into individual shapes. And then we have a rectangle here, and then we have a rectangle here down at the bottom. Okay, so I'm just going to split those two apart like that. Alright? So this composite shape is made up of three shapes, two rectangles and a triangle. Alright, I did that. Now I'm down to step number 2. I'm going to find the areas of the smaller shapes. Okay, so I have these three smaller shapes that are making up this bigger one. I'm going to find the areas of all three of those. Alright, so here's where getting organized helps us to stay on track. Alright, what I want to do is get the area of the rectangles first. So I have two rectangles, and what I always do is I start with the smaller rectangle first, or the smaller shape first, and I go to the bigger shape. It helps me keep it in order. So down here, this little rectangle, I'm going to name that rectangle number 1. Alright, and now I want to calculate the area of rectangle number 1. We have a length of 3 and a height or a width of 2. Alright, so my area 3 times 2 is going to be 6. I'm just going to write it out down here. I mean, you probably already realize what the area is. You don't have to write this all out. I'm just doing this since I'm taking notes and I want everyone to see it. Okay, 3 times 2 is 6, and then I want to circle that number so I don't get confused with these other numbers. Okay, so I know that this is my area, the one that I circled. Alright, something else you can do, because we're using grids on this first lesson, you could have just counted up the squares in the middle if you want and also have gotten 6. Okay, either way is fine. The grid just helps us out to make sure our math is okay. Alright, now let's move on to the bigger rectangle. This is going to be called rectangle number 2. I'll just nickname it REC number 2. Okay, and rectangle number 2, we have a length of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and we have a width of 4. Okay, so again, my area formula, 8 times 4 will give me 32. And then I'm going to circle that puppy right there because that's the area for my rectangle number 2. Alright, now if you really wanted to, you could have not multiplied these. You could have just simply counted up all the squares. But the problem is sometimes when we get to these bigger rectangles, it takes longer to count up all these squares than it is just to quickly do the math on that. Okay, but it's your choice. Alright, now comes to our third and final shape. We have the triangle. Alright, now the triangle, going back, looking at our formula here, we're going to multiply the base times the height. The base is like the bottom of the triangle, what it's sitting on. So here's my bottom edge of the triangle. That's what it's sitting on. My base is 8, and then my height, here comes the little tricky part here. Okay, the height, a lot of people, what they want to do is they want to use this side for the height to say how tall the triangle is. Okay, we can't do that. We can't use a slanted line to find the height of the triangle. What we have to do is we have to go to the top of the triangle and drop a line straight down. Okay, if there's not a line already straight down, we're going to drop a line straight down. This is going to be my height of the triangle, and you can always tell because it makes a nice 90-degree angle right there. That's what you want to be making. Okay, so my height is 2. Alright, so now I got the base and the height. I can do the math. So down here, my formula, 8 times 2 gives me 16, but then I have one more step. If you look up there, we need to divide by 2. So then that brings it back to 8. Alright, again, I'm writing all this stuff out so that you guys can see it when you're doing your work. If you don't need to write it all out, if you can do a lot of this mentally, that's fine. Okay? So we just completed, step number 1 was a long time ago. We just got done with step number 2. And notice how I circled all the areas so it doesn't get confusing with these other numbers. Now my third and final step is I want to add up all the areas. Alright, so I'm going to add the 6, the 32, and the 8. 6 plus 32 plus 8. Alright, again, I'm writing this stuff out so you guys can see it. And that's going to get me a grand total area of that composite shape of 46. And notice how they don't give us the units, centimeters, inches, feet, whatever it is. We don't have the units, so when you don't have that, we're just simply going to use U as units to the power of 2. Alright, and there is our area for that first shape. Okay, so really not all that difficult to math, just kind of being organized and breaking this into multiple steps to get your area. Alright, if you guys are feeling pretty good about that, let's go ahead and take a look at another shape here, and let's go through the same type of steps to get the area of this one. Alright, now this shape has a lot going on. We got this shape right here, kind of like a parallelogram attached to a rectangle with a triangle off to the end. Okay, so what I'm going to do, because we're only working with rectangles and triangles in this lesson, I'm going to move on to step number 1, and I'm going to break the shape into smaller or individual shapes. Alright, break the shape into individual shapes. And what I'm going to do is see how we have like these little triangles tagged on to the end right here and right here. I'm just going to break that up. So what I have is a rectangle here and then these two triangles on the end. Okay, so I just transform that parallelogram-y thing right here into just something that makes it easier to work with. Two triangles with a rectangle. Alright? So now we're going to move on to step number 2. We are going to find the areas of the smaller shapes. Okay, and again, staying organized, keeping organized. I'm going to list this out from the small shapes to the big shapes. Okay, to make it stay organized. So my smallest shape I have on here is the triangles. I have 3 triangles. They are all exactly the same size, so I don't need to write like triangle number 1, triangle number 2, triangle number 3, because I know that they're all the same. Okay, so I'm just going to write triangles. Okay, and now I need to calculate the area of these triangles. You probably looked at them and you're like, oh, okay, well, I know the area because this is part of a one square, and if I take this piece over here and it fits exactly like right there, then that makes the other part. So this triangle has an area of 1. And you're absolutely correct. And we could also calculate that. I mean, it's a real simple calculation. Here's the base of our triangle. The base of the triangle is 2. There's our 90-degree angle like we were talking about. There's the very top of our triangle. So the height of the triangle is 1. So if we did our math on that for the triangle, I'll just write it down here for the sake of this lesson. 2 times 1 gives us 2, and then we have to do the second part of our formula, divide by 2, and then we get 1. Okay, so each triangle has an area of 1. I have 3 of them, so then I'll just take that 1, multiply by 3. I'm just doing this so you guys can see the steps if you're watching along. Okay, and there's my final area for the triangles. 1, 2, 3, they all have an area of 1, so we have 3 total for the triangles. Okay, now let's move on to our rectangles. Start with the small rectangle. So let's call this rec number 1. Okay, and rec number 1 is a lot like rectangle number 1 in the last problem. We have a length of 3, a width of 2. 3 times 2 is going to get us 6. Alright, so there's my area of that one. Again, if you're a counting person, then you could have counted that up. Let's move on to our very last shape. We got rectangle number 3, or sorry, rectangle number 2. Okay, good. It's good to use those number symbols there so that way you don't get this number like confused that you have to add or do something with it up into these other areas. Okay. Rectangle number 2, we have a length of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, a width of 4. 6 times 4 is going to get us 24. Okay, circle that guy right there. Again, you could have counted if you wanted to, whichever way you want to do it. And look at this, we are on to the last step of this composite shape thing that we got going on. Number 3, we're going to add up all the areas. So I'm going to take my 24 plus 6 plus 3, add that all together. That's going to get me 33. And we don't have the units like centimeters or inches or whatever, so we can just use U for units squared to show that this is 33 units squared, to show that we're actually calculating the area. That's what that 33 represents. Alright, there is your first lesson on composite shapes. We'll work on this some more in class. I got a project for you guys that we're going to be doing with this when you guys come to class again, so look forward to that. And then we'll be moving on to the second part of the area of composite shapes. Alright, see you guys in class. Thanks for watching.